We're continuing our series, My Type, today, and we're talking about the largest group of people in society, according to the Myers-Briggs concept, guardians. Can't hear a woot-woot for guardians. They're not really those kinds of people, but yeah, it gets good. We're talking about guardians today, and guardians are 40 to 45% of society. If we look at the four main types we've talked about, guardians have an SJ in their four-letter code. We talked about rationals, idealists last week, guardians today, artisans next week. Guardians have an SJ in their Myers-Briggs code, which means they're a sensory judger. And the word judge has bad connotations in our society. It has absolutely nothing to do whatsoever with the idea of, don't you judge me, who are you to judge me? It has nothing to do with that. Sensory means that guardians look at concrete facts, figures, colors, details, logistics. And judging means people prefer structure and to have a schedule and deadlines. And guardians, is that true about you? Do you like those things? Yes. So sensory judgers and guardians are wonderful people that we're going to be talking about today. And the reason that we're talking about personality types at all is because every week we're looking at a couple of scriptures that are showing us, reminding us of the big picture of what it means to follow Jesus. Here we are, we're in a school auditorium, beautiful place. We live in a beautiful valley. And there are all kinds of options for how you want to live your life and the priorities that you have and how you make your decisions. We're here because we're saying we want to follow Jesus. We want to model our lives after Jesus. And if we were to ask Jesus what that means, hey, Jesus, what does it look like to follow you? Here's what he would say. Comes from Mark. This is a scripture we're looking at every week. Love the Lord. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. In other words, love God with all you are, all of your faculties. And the second command is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. So it's about love. Jesus would say, following me is about love. I want to love God with all I am, and I want to love my neighbor as myself. Well, that's sometimes hard to do, right? And we don't want to get into the try and fail guilt cycle where I try to be a good little Christian boy or a good little Christian girl, and I mess up. And now I feel guilty. And so I try again, and then I mess up, and now I feel even guiltier. And then I try again, I mess up, and then I eventually don't even care. This is a growth process. We want to grow to love God with all we are, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. Just a daily growth process, step by step. Bill Murray, what about Bob? Baby steps. Just step by step. It's a process. It's a transformation. Here's how Paul puts it. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed. Be willing to let God change you, grow you, work in your life by the renewing of your mind, to change the way you think and to help you see in new ways and prioritize in new ways, have a different set of values over time. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good will. So we're talking about personality types because we all view the world differently. Our brains, according to our types, process information differently. We make decisions differently. And it's a very simple thing. If we understand how we're wired, then we know how we can kind of grow in a customized way. These are the things I struggle with just because of my wiring. And these are ways that I can grow to love God and other people according to how I'm wired. So, today, guardians. Here are the four types of guardians. And we don't have time to go into them, but there's information in your worship folder, and you can go online and read all kinds of things that could absolutely change your life, your marriage, your work. It could have a massive impact on your life. But here are the four types of guardians. The ESTJ, supervisor. ESTJs are the highest percentage of corporate executives. About 15% of corporate executives are ESTJs. ISTJ, inspector. ESFJ, provider. And the ISFJ, protector. You can go online and look up your four-letter code. So, characteristics of guardians. First of all, I want to read a quote from David Kiersey in a book called Please Understand Me, and then that's one of the websites. He says, guardians, SJs, are the cornerstone of society. It's a pretty nice thing to have said about you, isn't it? The cornerstone of society. For they are the temperament given to serving and preserving our most important social institutions. Guardians have natural talent in managing goods and services. from supervision to maintenance and supply. And they use all their skills to keep things running smoothly in their families, communities, schools, churches, hospitals, and businesses. The cornerstones of society. That's pretty nice, isn't it? Let's look at some characteristics of guardians. Guardians are dependable. They're people, when they say they'll do something, these are generalities, of course, but they'll do it. They'll follow through. If you need something done and done right, ask a guardian. They're hardworking. People who aren't afraid to roll up their sleeves and get involved in what needs to be done. They're dutiful. They'll do something because it needs to be done, and they'll look around and say, oh, somebody's got to do this, so I will. Guardians are typically cautious. Guardians will see potential pitfalls. They're good at seeing details, and they can see what can go wrong in a situation. So normally they'll proceed with caution. Guardians value tradition. We're all wired differently. Guardians tend to value the past the most of any personality type. What has been done before, it's time-tested, it's proven, and guardians value that. Guardians trust authority, again, generally. Guardians have the view that the fabric of society is held in place by certain institutions and authorities and government and these kinds of things that we need, and leaders, and guardians will usually show deference to those leaders. Guardians are joiners. They will join groups of all kinds. If you think of the World War II generation, a couple of weeks ago, we just marked the 70th anniversary of D-Day, right? When Allied forces invaded Normandy and turned the tide of World War II and defeated Hitler. That whole World War II generation, the greatest generation, they almost have like a guardian-like quality, the whole generation. When you think of that generation, it's a guardian-like mindset you think of, because they were dutiful, but they joined groups when the army needed help. You know, people enlisted. And then after the war was over, they came back and they joined the Kiwanis and church groups. And they just built a better society. And it was the golden age of American capitalism. They were just joiners. They understood these are people who survived the Great Depression when they were little. And they understood that we just have to band together to make it through certain things. So guardians are joiners. And as leaders, guardians are stabilizers. If you're in a company or organization where things are going well, and you just want it to continue that way, you want a rock-solid leadership structure, you want stability in your organization, then you put a guardian in leadership. And they're going to project just rock-solid security in an organization. So those are great characteristics of guardians. So we're going to move on to relationships, career, and spiritual life. For relationships, and there's a place for you to take notes as well in your worship handout. If you're new, there's your worship folder. It's a place where you can jot some things down that hopefully you'll want to remember. Especially, there's so many guardians, chances are half of you are married to them. So you want to take good notes today. In relationships, this is really interesting. Guardians aspire to be a helpmate. Now, if you remember, if you were here the first 2 weeks of the series, rationals look for, does anybody remember, a mind mate? Last week, we saw how idealists look for a soul mate. So check this out. Rationals look for a mind mate. Guardians look for a soulmate. Guardians want to be a helpmate. That's a difference, isn't it? Guardians are so responsibility oriented. They're thinking more of, who do I want to be in the relationship? And by helpmate, that might sound, odd to some folks. It means that guardians want to see themselves as a part of a team. In a guardian marriage or guardian long-term partnership, guardians want to see themselves as a part of a team. They want to be teammates with the people they're with. And that has connotations of accomplishing things, working together, setting up goals and knocking them down and making lists and checking things off the list. Guardians love lists. Can I get an amen? You really love lists more than that, actually. More than you let on. So guardians want to be a team player in a relationship. It's an amazing quality. Guardians are dependable, responsible. A lot of family activities with guardians will be centered around taking care of the house, taking care of the lawn, just doing things that need done, planning for the future, a budgeting process. Guardians just do what needs to be done, and they can find fulfillment in a relationship by doing those things. If you're married to a guardian, one of the things you could do that your mate would appreciate most is chip in and help, and around the house or just in tasks like budgeting and that kind of thing. Just chip in and help to knock down some of those tasks. Is that right, honey? My wife agrees that that's a good way my wife's a guardian. And guardians, because they're so hardworking and responsible, and they're willing to jump in when other people are not, they need appreciation and downtime. Guardians need to be told, and this is all they ask. Hey, thanks. Thanks for doing that. I appreciate the effort that you put into that, because many times guardians will jump in and do things that other people won't do because they know it's necessary for something to work, so they'll do it, and other people will take it for granted. And so if you're in a relationship with a guardian, one of the most powerful things you could possibly do is to express appreciation to your partner. My wife is a guardian. If you remember, I'm irrational. And so it's an interesting relationship that we have. And Kiersey would say that we are exact opposites in every way. There's actually a model, if you were to look in the book, Please Understand Me, or online, of like 4 skills that each type is good at, list in order. We are complete opposites. The things I'm good at, she's not. The things she's good at, I'm not. And so that can be interesting at times because you're so different that you have to learn about each other. You have to learn how each other is wired in order to just complete the things that you need to do. But the upside of that, and there are many upsides, the upside of that is that I can honestly say my wife pours into my life to such an extent, and she balances me where I am weak in so many ways. I, honest to God, don't think this church would be possible without her. And all right, thank you. And she deserves that. Because here's how this works. I live my life up in the ether as irrational. Like I'm up in a cloud somewhere. I'm thinking about big ideas and strategy. My life is a whirlwind. And I like it that way. And I'm always just thinking big. And what are we going to do next? We're going to go to this new location. And what needs to be done? And almost every major idea that I have, I've learned the value of running it by my wife. Because when I have some idea that I think is awesome, and I share it with my wife, if I get a blank stare, I know it's not quite developed yet. I know that it's just not quite going to work on the real world and in real world circumstances, and so I know I have to go back and make it more concrete. Make sure it's realistic. You follow me? Because that's what guardians are good at. And make sure there are steps that I can take. I see some of you nodding. Maybe your relationships work like this too. And virtually every major thing in this church has been made better because I have someone with me who is my opposite, who can communicate a completely different viewpoint and how people are going to respond. You see the power of that? And there may not be a guardian in your relationship. But one of the things that's taught me is whatever your relationship combination is to think about the things you value about your spouse, your partner, your friends, maybe whoever you're thinking of. Because there are so many things, a lot of times we see the opposite things. We see the different things before we see how much it helps us. And it's just good to think through, even make a list of here's why I value this person so much. Here's how they pour into my life, and here's how they make me better. My wife certainly does that for me. So guardians work hard to make a good life. And they view marriage and family as an opportunity to be a team and work together to accomplish goals. All right? They just want a little appreciation in return. All right, career. How does being a guardian affect career? You find, again, these are generalities, but you find guardians in careers like, executive management, finance. Wall Street is a guardian sector of society. You just find guardians all over finance and business, law enforcement, accountants, librarians, lawyers, teachers, virtually any business mogul you can think of is probably going to come from the guardian world. Here's a list of some famous guardians from entertainment: Jimmy Stewart, Andrea Mitchell, Ed Sullivan, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Barbara Walters, Larry King, Dan Rather, Mike Wallace, Vince Lombardi. Politics. Almost half of all presidents of the United States have been guardians. Is that interesting? Including the first president, Abraham Lincoln. Just keeping you on your toes, okay? Every once in a while. The first, George Washington, of course, was a guardian. Almost half of all presidents have been guardians. In business, Warren Buffett, Sam Walton, they've done pretty well for themselves, correct? Ray Kroc, John D. Rockefeller, J.C. Penney. This is interesting. In philosophy, religion, Brigham Young, Thomas Hobbes, Rose Kennedy, Rosa Parks, Clara Barton. Bible characters. If you know some of these Bible characters, they can give you an idea of how guardians function in their vocation with the people around them. Ruth. Ruth is a character in the Old Testament. There's a book named after her, the book of Ruth, and Ruth is known for marrying a man named Boaz, and she was a woman of noble character. She was a woman who took the high road. When she could have taken the low road, she chose to take the high road and do the right thing. She's a model of, it's a beautiful Hebrew word, chesed. Chesed. Anybody want to say that with me? Chesed. Chesed. It is the ultimate word. It means God's loving kindness. The grace and patience of God that God shows to you. I liked it so much, I decided to keep it around. It's the word chesed. Ruth is a model of God's chesed, God's patient, loving kindness. She's the great-grandmother of King David and an ancestor of Jesus. Caleb is a leader in the Old Testament, the book of Numbers. The people, the Israelites are wandering in the desert and they're ready to go into the promised land. So they send a couple of spies to go see if can we really do this? Can we take the promised land? And Caleb is one of those. And most of the spies come back and they say, we can't do it. There's no way. We're toast. Game over. We just go back where we came from. We can't go forward. Caleb is one of the people who says, you know what? I think we can do this. He was a bold leader. He's known for his boldness. In the New Testament, I think probably Luke, who wrote the Gospel of Luke. I think Luke is probably a guardian. In Luke chapter 1, Luke tells us that he wants to create an orderly account of the life of Jesus, as factually accurate as he can possibly make it. Luke writes in a way that is detailed and concrete. He gives us some of the stories that Jesus tells that are in no other gospel. Everybody else missed it, apparently. The prodigal son is in Luke, for example. The Good Samaritan. I think Luke was probably a guardian. So, if guardians probably are happy in their careers, they're such hard workers, they probably already know, but maybe younger people, or maybe if you're at a transition in your life, and you're not sure how happy you are with your career. Are you doing things that push buttons for guardians? Detailed, logistical work. Is it stable? Are you in a job that values dependability and stability and just you're following through and getting the job done? Are you in an environment that really doesn't do it for you? Is that what's behind your stress? Or are you in a career that really fits you? Right, so guardian career. And then finally, spiritual life. Guardians have usually a great relationship with churches. Without guardians, essentially every organization in society would fall apart. Whether it's churches, businesses, other nonprofits, the Red Cross, the school PTA, it doesn't matter what it is. Without guardians, most organizations would fall apart because guardians get involved. And so many of you here who are guardians, you probably are plugged in some way. So I want to affirm you in some ways and then challenge you in one, but just offer maybe some advice, the best I could do for how to grow spiritually as a guardian. Let's say that the number one thing, the most important thing for a guardian, is that guardians grow by getting involved. Guardians grow in groups. Guardians are the most sociable of the types, and the best thing that you could do as a guardian is probably to join a one group. And you can sign up outside, isn't that convenient? At the information center. Or a ministry. And many of you probably are. But guardians grow in groups. Guardians who are isolated, they just feel cut off socially, and that is not where a guardian wants to be. But if a guardian wants to grow spiritually, they'll want to be around other people so they can socialize and get input from other people and just be a part of the conversation and the life of the group. And guardians will grow with that. They're such joiners and contributors that they'll join together with that group and they'll all grow together as teammates again. So they just view life as a team sport. And so guardians can grow best by getting in groups. One of the awesome things that we're doing right now is the Back to School Blessing shoe drive. We have a nice growing pile of shoes out there. Did you see those? Isn't that exciting? We're on our way. We have a couple of more weeks to donate shoes. And the city of Chandler holds an event at Chandler High School. There'll be hundreds of families who are going to come through. And they're going to need shoes to start the school year off right. We did this last year, and our new church, rattling around in Hancock Elementary, gave 125 pairs of shoes. And we had a team of people who volunteered to go over and sort and help distribute shoes. That event this year is July 19th. If you're interested in doing that, you can volunteer to go over to the high school and sort, Chandler High School, and sort and help distribute shoes. Now, some people might think, well, I don't want to just give people a handout because I believe in responsibility. I believe in hard work. And if people aren't willing to do that, I don't want to enable them to not do that. Let me tell you about my experience last year with the shoe drive. We didn't go to the high school last year. It was another school. And I believe for 2 hours before the event started, there was a line across the campus. 2 hours before the shoe giveaway started. Mostly moms and their kids. And when we opened the doors and everybody came through, I didn't know exactly what to expect. Sometimes you have this stereotype that people are just going to kind of grab stuff and just like take off and they're not going to be thankful. Some people have that stereotype. And that's not at all what I experienced. What I experienced was people, a lot of moms and little kids coming through with beaming looks on their faces. So excited about these shoes. It was like a shopping trip. But I didn't see like grabbing or clamoring for them. They just came through in this orderly way through a line. And they would say, size 2, whatever. And then we'd have a runner who'd go to size 2. Go, okay, try that on. And I didn't hear like, oh, I don't like that color or whatever. I didn't hear any of that. I just saw kids, oh yeah. And they grabbed their shoes and they sat down and they had their shoes off already, their old shoes, and they were ready to go. And we received thank you notes from parents. We received lots of verbal thank yous just going through the line. There was so much joy in that room. And that's something local that we can do as a church, far more than just the shoe drive, but it's just a way for us to get in. I was going to say get a foot in the door. I'm like, it's just so bad. But it would be great, Guardians, we need your help. Guardians, we need your help. Because in some of these activities, again, there are lots of people in the Southeast Valley. They don't want to come face to face with a mom and some kids who need some shoes, who have real needs in their lives. They'd like to block their eyes to real needs in the world. And you Guardians aren't afraid to roll up your sleeves and get involved. Guardians get in the game. They're great at that. And we need you. And this is an area, the shoe drive, that you could serve. And we'll be giving more information about it. And you'll have all the details. And you can be a part of that if you want. Here's the challenge I would give to Guardians. And I have 2 things that I think are just amazing about Guardians, and I'm going to give one challenge. A challenge for Guardians to grow spiritually might be something like this. Being open to new things that God might want to do in your life. To change. To transformation. Today's Trinity Sunday on the Christian calendar. We mark the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And, the Spirit of God is always working in our lives to lead us forward, to do things in our lives, to heal us, make us better people, to lead us toward rolling up our sleeves and partnering with God to get involved in this world and make this world better in Jesus' name. The Spirit of God is always doing things in our hearts that require us to be open and to change. Guardians value tradition. They value the way things have been done before. Like any personality, your greatest strength can become your greatest weakness. So that would just be my challenge. And a great question for anybody, really, but Guardians too, would be, what new thing is God doing in my life? It's not on the screen, but you might want to jot it down. What new thing is God doing in my life? And you kind of look around. It's a different way of thinking, isn't it? A lot of times we get in our busyness. We just want to knock down our goals and our projects, but just a reflective question. What new thing is God doing in my life? Today's Men's Day. And, for guys who are married, that question could look like, what new thing is God wanting to do in my life and my life as a husband, as a father? What new thing does God want to do? How does God want to challenge me and grow me? You don't have to be married and have kids. Ask questions like this. How does God want to grow my character at work? How could I better represent Jesus at work? How could Jesus live through me and help me to love God and my neighbor more? What new thing does God want to do? Because believe me, God always wants to do a new thing in your life. because he wants us to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So my challenge to guardians and to everybody would be to be open to whatever new thing God wants to do. What new thing is God doing in my life? And you kind of look around and you say, oh, I'm being challenged here. I'm being stretched here. I have an opportunity here. And let the Spirit of God lead you and grow you in your character. And then lastly, this is one of the things that, or maybe the thing that I value about guardians the most in my life. I have lots of guardians in my family. My wife is, and lots of family members are. We have lots of guardians in this church. The thing I probably value the most about guardians is that guardians will do the right thing because it's the right thing. How many of you would agree that in our society, a lot of times the question has ended up being, what's in it for me? You sense that in our society? Or you think we're in a what's in it for me society? You think so? I see that. I see that in every area of life, and a lot of times, even pastors will feel like they have to give a sales pitch, like to jump in and get involved and serve, and whether it's back to the school blessings shoe drive or the setup team or whatever it is. It's like we have to give a sales pitch, like, well, if you serve, it'll make you feel good. It's like serving is a drug, It's like, well, you could, glass of wine, vacation to Cancun, or you could serve because it'll make you feel good. So a lot of pastors feel like they have to give a sales pitch to some people, and there always has to be some other motive for serving and doing good things in the world, that somehow benefits selfish desires. A lot of pastors feel that pressure. One of the things I appreciate about guardians is guardians will do it because it needs done. Guardians are typically considered with right and wrong. And responsibility, and this thing needs done, and I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do. Generally speaking, now of course there are exceptions in all these, but generally speaking, guardians will do the honest thing when nobody's looking. And what an amazing quality in your spiritual life. Guardians will do the right thing because it's the right thing, with no other hidden agenda or motive. They'll just do it. And I've learned if you just say thank you, man, guardians will do all kinds of things to make this world better and give in all kinds of ways. And it's an amazing spiritual quality. So I'm going to close with this story, and it's especially appropriate on Men's Day because this was a great man that I knew, and he's still around, but he lives on the other side of the country now, and I don't have a whole lot of contact with him anymore. But he's a great example for guys, yeah, but for everybody. His name's John. And in the last church I served in, the church was about 50 years old, and they had a physical, they had a building, and they had done some additions over time, but a lot of the building had been neglected over time. And, there are a lot of feelings in our society about church buildings, and some people are against church buildings and that kind of thing. But if you're going to have a building, you want to take care of it. Because if you don't, it just doesn't send the message you want it to send. And there were all kinds of problems that had been neglected in this church building. The roof needed repair, AC unit, and just all kinds of things. John was recently retired. He was in his early 60s. He'd worked in an electric company for his entire career. And John apparently looked around and saw that these things needed to be taken care of, and nobody was doing it. So John joined the church board as the physical property trustee. Probably 62, 63, retired guy. And he said, I'm going to go ahead and take care of these things. Now, I was raised partially by my grandparents, and I've never been accused of disrespecting my elders. I have an amazing amount of respect for people who are my elders. And I've met a couple of different types of retired people. One type of retired people are people who basically disappear into a world of continual golf and traveling. And they just kind of are cut off from their community. Because I guess now they figure work's over, now it's time to play. And there's nothing wrong with some golf, nothing wrong with some traveling. But I know some folks who are retired, man, they're just gone. They stopped working in Splitsville at that point. There's another group of people who are retired. And they're people who realize that their retirement years can be every bit, if not more, productive than their work careers. And when I looked at John was this kind of a guy. So John jumped in to the needs that this church had. He basically served as a volunteer general contractor for the church for like 5 years. So the roof needs replaced. He organized the whole thing to get it done. All of the people who need to be contacted, he did all that. He did it all for free. The parking lot needs an extension. He organized all that, did it for free. The AC unit needs replaced. He had it done. What else? They revamped their lobby. They revamped their audio, video, lighting capabilities. They changed some offices around. I mean, the guy's retired, right? He's a volunteer. Here's the truth. John did more for that church than some pastors have. There were some pastors who served that church, and John has had a bigger impact on that church than some of the pastors. I was on staff there, and I looked at John, and I watched him do all these things. He would be working and organizing and just doing all these things because they needed to be done. And I was a pastor on staff at the church, and I looked at a guy who wasn't a pastor. He was volunteering his time. And I said, I want to be like John when I am retired. When I am at his place in life, I want to be like John. Because this world desperately needs people who will do the right thing because it's the right thing and it needs done. And he was a great guardian. It's a great guardian quality. And it is true. All he asked in return was a thank you. Was a little bit of appreciation. That guy, during that time, he buried his father, who lived in Sun City, actually. He took care of his wife, who had struggled with a chronic lung disease for decades. She passed away last year. With all these things on his plate, man, that John rolled up his sleeves, and he made a contribution that will never be forgotten in that church. That, my goodness, they would have been up a creek without him, and he did it because it was the right thing that needed to be done. Guardians, I want to let you know that as a new church, we need you. We need stability. New churches need stability. New churches need the kind of people who will do things because they need done, because it's the right thing. And many of you already are involved, actually. Some of you maybe not. And please consider this a personal invitation, because we need you. And like I said before, we have big dreams. We believe that God is calling this new little church meeting in this huge room to do some things that are impactful in the future. Some things that are desperately needed in the Southeast Valley. And I've asked this question before. Is Chandler and Gilbert, are they the only cities in America that need a church like One Church? Where questions and doubts are welcome and no perfect people allowed and following Jesus is as much about this world as the next? Are they the only cities in this country that need a new church? What if we could even lead a movement of new churches? To be like-minded churches, to partner with God and what God's doing in our generation and in our society where a church like this is desperately needed. We need guardians to bring stability and leadership into fulfilling a vision like that. So, guardians, right before we pray, I want you to hear me say something very, very loud and clear. Are you ready? Ready? I appreciate